Hello and welcome to another episode of the Fourmation Podcast. This is episode number 39 and Euro 2020 is over. It's been a brilliant month of football, but sadly, it wasn't the dream ending for England. It wasn't a brilliant ending. They lost on penalties to Italy in the final after a nerve-wracking night. It just sadly wasn't to be. And I think this defeat could take a little bit of time for England players and England fans to get over and recover from. As we did last week after the joy of the Denmark defeat, we just want to kind of gauge our reactions. I think it's about 36 hours since the defeat now that we're recording. Sam, how are you feeling? Are you also thinking it might take a bit of time to get over?
Yeah, similar to the Croatia one really 3 years ago, but even slightly more painful this time because we got a step further, just fell at the final hurdle. But yes, it's another what could have been situation really. And I think on the night the best team won. I think Italy probably deserved it just about in the end, but obviously it's a cruel way to lose a final on penalties, isn't it? And it's just the typical way, England way of losing it in the end, isn't it?
Yeah, it certainly is the cruelest way to lose, no doubt about that. Harry, are you pleased that we've taken a day to kind of process the result before recording this? Do you feel like you'll be able to explain your views on it a bit more now?
I think yesterday was just a massive rest day for everyone where the country wasn't quite in mourning, because I think that's quite an extreme way to put it. But everything around my area at least felt a bit quiet. Everyone, all the flags had to be taken down, all the paintings on the walls, they were taken down. It's just sadness, to be honest. But we've had 24 hours to look over it, digest what happens, digest the tournament as a whole. And yeah, this is where we analyse what went on.
Yeah, Devon, you've done a good job of looking as miserable as you can about this result. I know before we spoke, you still sound particularly downbeat. Do you want to kind of explain how you are feeling at this point?
Dead. It's just, as soon as you buy into it and then your feelings are all just cemented on one outcome and you're like, you don't know how you're going to react until it happens, and it did. It just, I hate football. Can we talk about tennis? Can we talk about Open coming up?
Well, it's Open weekend next week for all the golf fans, of course. It's interesting, Harry, you say about taking the flags down. As the people watching on YouTube will know, I haven't taken mine down, and neither with the wall chart. I almost couldn't bring myself to do it yesterday. I feel like I don't feel like the matter is completely closed yet, even though we're not getting another game or anything like that.
Petitions up. I don't know how many signatures it's got, but someone's put a petition for the rematch, so it may happen. It's still alive.
Oh, if only that was as easy as that was. But no, we should say congratulations to Italy, because I think in terms of the English coverage after the game on TV, I think a few people have been critical of the fact that it was so focused on England, but at the same time, that's only natural when it's an English channel, and we don't really care about what the Italy viewpoint is. But fair play to them. As Sam said, they probably were the better team on the night. And we should say, before we move on to talk about the game specifically, when we made our predictions before a ball was kicked, because I went back before this episode to have a look at those. When we picked our eventual winners, Sam did say, watch out for Italy, before then saying France, I should add. But you should have backed your dark horses in a way, Sam.
It was hard not to go with France, wasn't it, with the crazy squad depth they had. But this tends to happen in international tournaments. You always have a few surprises, but Italy on the run they've been now, 34 games unbeaten now. You had to consider them as one of the outside favourites for the tournament. In the end, they've delivered.
Mm-hmm. They absolutely have. So we will talk over what went on now, starting with what looked like a dream start for England. Well, it wasn't what looked like a dream start. It was a dream start. because they flew out of the blocks and were ahead within the first 120 seconds. Luke Shaw with his first goal for his country, and what a goal it was, Devon. Was it kind of too good to be true at that point? Or no time is a bad time to score, is it?
It just felt like a continuation of events that had happened from the Germany game, from going 1-0 up, and then obviously the Ukraine 4-0, beating Denmark in extra time, which ended comfortably with possession. And you're thinking, this is just like a chain reaction of things happening. And in a way, in hindsight, now it looks like the worst thing England could have done, which was taking the lead that early, because it just seemed to spirit the change too early from Gareth to bring it more conservative. And unfortunately, I think that's what lost us the match, or at least let the pendulum swing into Italy's favour for the rest of for more of the second half and extra time. But overall, taking all of that aside, just the actual euphoria that we felt as the ball hit the back of the net, absolutely fantastic finish, great ball. And we just the whole, I'm pretty sure the whole of England shook for that moment, just because it was such a good of a moment. And I don't think I'll ever forget that. And as Sam said beforehand, life peaked at that moment.
There'll be a few tweets, I imagine, like the Trippier free kick saying, "Don't lie, your life peaked at this moment." But at that point, it was another good. Southgate would have thought, I've made another good decision here tactically, because it was the two wing backs that were linking up in the end. Obviously, switched back to a back five for the start of the game, and Trippier and Shaw linked up for the goal, both of them bombing forwards to create that overload on the wings, and it worked at the start of the game. But as Devon mentioned, we sort of slipped into our shell a little bit after the goal, and I think the first half an hour we stopped any of Italy's attacks. They didn't look like they were threatening to score a goal, but as the game went on, as it slipped into the second half, it only looked like it was going one way, and Italy were going to get that equaliser eventually.
Yeah, I don't know about you, but I almost felt it was too comfortable in the first half, Harry. I was almost expecting that Italy onslaught straight away, but I think as it turned out, they probably managed their intensity pretty well in the second half. As Sam said there, they pushed on and eventually got the goal.
Well, that's the thing. The home advantage will get you so far, and that's sort of the extra energy boost that our England team needed. That we had the days less rest. We did play 120 minutes of football, so getting that early goal, like Devon said, as fantastic as it was, you hate to say a goal was too early, because if you say it's too early, you wait and you don't get the goal later and it finishes 1-0, then it's a great storyline. But I think the difference was that we had players like Sterling and Kane that played 120 minutes just a matter of days before. Was it Wednesday? I can't remember the exact day it was. But you had an Italy side that Mancini wasn't scared of taking off his really top level players. You know, you look at Insigne, you look at Immobile in the previous games. They didn't last the entire 120 minutes, and extra time on top of, penalties on top of that. They kept their team fresh, and that, I think that at the end of the day is what really helps them, because we did look leggy in that final third, and I think that's really what came down to it, that we weren't able to create those shot and chance creating actions. You just have to look at the shots on target. After Luke Shaw's goal, we only had one in the entirety of the game on target, that is, and that really shows in the scoreline and really the way the game as a whole was portrayed.
Yeah, and it was Leonardo Bonucci, the 34-year-old centre-back, who, along with Chiellini at the back, they both had excellent tournaments. Bonucci got the equaliser for Italy. Sam, do you feel as if when that equaliser came, there should have been more of a response from England in terms of trying to prevent it from going to extra time? Do you think we were just scared about conceding another?
Yeah, it felt like we were almost passengers in the game for a lot of the second half, to be honest, and we were just waiting for Italy to do something, waiting for Italy to pounce, and they did. I mean, great save from Jordan Pickford initially to stop Verratti's header, turning it onto the post, but then obviously Bonucci bundled it in. I think one of the big talking points before the game was that battle with the two Italian centre backs and Harry Kane, and those two came out on top, definitely. You know, Harry Kane didn't do anything in the game, really. Didn't have a shot, I don't think. Didn't create a chance. Looked very lethargic, to be honest. Look back to how he looked during the group stage, really, and that was obviously a mixture of things. Us not being very aggressive in the second half, like I say, not taking those risks in the attacking phase, but also Kane's movement was lacking in the end, and that was a big sort of turning point in the game. That was where the game was won, really, for Italy.
I just don't think, like Sam mentioned, the overloads from the wing backs, which you'd expect those wing backs to be there, and probably Sterling the focal point of that, with Kane dropping in and giving it to the wing backs. And like we said, for the first 5 minutes we were doing that, and then all of a sudden it just stopped, and I don't understand why. Because I mean, like Harry said that we didn't take the players off, but I think Kane's too important anyway to take him off. There were no way that Kane were going to go off that, especially when it went to penalties, because as we saw, even if he were leggy, that were absolutely brilliant penalty to get it past Donnarumma, despite him guessing the right way, especially after missing the penalty in the previous game, but score. But he, Raheem Sterling was the only player sort of driving England forward in them latter stages. It looked like he'd not even played 120 minutes. It looked like he'd come fresh off an injury that had just, he were ready to pounce. It was just other players, I think, that were lacking, and maybe decisions a bit earlier.
Do you think it limited us slightly in that we had two players, as you say there, Devon and Kane and Sterling, who we knew weren't going to be subbed off, which meant there were only a certain number who you could switch with, which meant we maybe couldn't change that much at all in reality?
Yeah, I think you look at the side, Mason Mount were probably going to be the one that got pulled first from that attacking line. Then you look at even though Declan Rice, I thought, had a phenomenal first half. I think he was the one that was he looked like the Rice that played for West Ham this season. Previously, I think he's been good, but he's been more back towards his own goal, passing it around between the two centre-halves or three, and not really getting involved. Whereas this time he was aggressive, he was running forward, he was progressive, rather than being cautious. But you knew he were going to get pulled for Henderson, because Phillips is that person that gets on the ball and looks forward to drive it. And I mean, Phillips, again, brilliant. And then that back line, you don't really want to touch that back line. And as we saw, didn't change it until the 119th minute when he brought on the Rashford and Sancho just for the penalties, which I absolutely hate, because you need to kick a ball. You need at least 5 minutes to get into the swing of the game, get your legs into actual game mode, and not just sit there and just take a penalty. Because I think it's just, there's a story that I had, and in the 2012 playoff final, Sheffield United brought on Andy Taylor against Huddersfield just to take a penalty, and he missed. He blazed it over the bar. And ever since saw that moment, every time I think someone's coming on for a penalty, I always shun it, and they always miss. They always seem to miss.
It's interesting you say that. I think, Harry, you feel the same way, don't you? You don't think that was a good move?
You look at Zaza for Italy all those years back, came on for a penalty, ridiculous run up, missed. Even this tournament, Rodri, I believe it was subbed on specifically for a penalty, and he missed as well. And I just look at the players that they brought on. Don't get me wrong, if you want to sub them on for a penalty, that's okay. You know, I can deal with that, but not 2 minutes before the end of the game. You look at Rashford, you look at Sancho. These aren't YouTubers that smack penalties top bins. These and would affect the game. These are players that are able to make an impact in the game with 10 minutes to go. So they're A, used to the game, B, can make a difference with their fresh legs, especially if they're going to take penalties, and then C, take the penalty. No, they're not players that if you sub on, you can only do it with 30 seconds to go because it might affect the outcome of the game. These aren't bad. These players are in the England squad. These players play for Manchester United, or for one of them about to play for Manchester United. Give them that extra 10 minutes, give them the fresh legs so they can get into the game. The amount of pressure, in my opinion, that you've put on someone, especially for Sancho and Rashford, who Rashford's not started a game this tournament. Sancho's played one game against the Ukraine. They're coming on in the final, and they know their one job of this tournament, really, their singular job of this tournament is to score a penalty in the final. I don't care how good you've been in training taking penalties. I don't care how good for a club you've been at taking penalties. That is an extreme amount of pressure. That is an extreme amount of pressure to put on people. Some people can handle it. And look, penalties, they can be a lottery. Some people think they are. I don't think they are at the end of the day, because it just frustrates me, because I think that there's a final on pens here to be won, and I just think if they sub him on 10 minutes earlier, they get used to the pressure of the environment, it could have been a different story. But if they did score, it'd be a masterstroke from Gareth Southgate. So you can easily look at it either way. They were just unlucky in the fact that their penalties were unlucky with a post and saved by Donnarumma as well.
Yeah, just to add to that as well, I think bringing on those, we needed to bring on those players also because of how the game was going. I think there's only been one game at Wembley where we've had less possession than this one. So our transitional play was really important. How we broke forward when we got the ball in the defensive third. We needed those players up top that had fresh legs, like you say. Those players, Rashford, Sancho, Grealish, they should have been brought on earlier, really, to really cause a threat in transition. So that's it, really. That's the one key decision that Gareth Southgate got wrong in the end. I mean, he's made loads of correct decisions. He's not really got a decision wrong up until that point, but that's the one that mattered in the end.
I think I said it in the semi-final talk that we did, that I'd have started, well, at least brought on Sancho rather than Saka, just because I think with how Italy were going to set up with Emerson going forward, and ultimately that's one of the reasons why we scored that opening goal, is because Emerson decided he was just going to venture off down the left. Trippier got that space in that overload, and then Shaw got into the correct space past the Italy right back, meaning that. But in this, especially that end bit there, where obviously Chiellini's legs are going to tire, no matter how good he is, or is like a fine wine, as we would probably cliche it. But no matter how good he is, especially with how Saka breezed past him, with the controversial neck pull, which was more in a 50 Shades of Grey sense rather than football. But as we. You're looking at them kind of moments, you think that's perfect for Sancho because it operates like that. He gets round the wing, the second centre half, and he gets in them positions. And you're thinking, like, even when Saka came in, there were a couple of misplaced passes, and I think the occasion just got to him. And I'm not taking the penalty into account. This is strictly the game. Is that I just think Saka looked a bit too nervous, and somewhat, even though Sancho's only 22, I think Sancho, especially playing in like the Pokal final, and he's played in a lot more high pressure games, I think Sancho would have been the perfect person to bring on at that moment. But I think we just made it too late, some of these decisions.
It felt like that was part of Italy's game plan, though. There's niggly fouls, and that's why you've got to move the ball quickly. You can't, but a lot of situations where it was one-on-one situations where if the player got past like that very instant you mentioned with Saka, Devon, he gets past Chiellini and he fouls him. He's always going to foul him because he knows he's not going to be able to catch him. There's too many of those 1v1 situations. We needed to move the ball quicker to stop them from being able to make those niggly fouls to stop the attack before they even started.
Well, Chiellini at 36 now, maybe Devon's just suggested his next career move. But we won't get into that.
Does he have his own gym suit? That's what we need to know.
I thought it would be interesting as well. This might have been done over the last day or two since the Rashford and Sancho misses, but if someone looked back through shootouts over the last 10 years and studied the success of players who come off the bench, because I think there might be something in that which shows that more miss than score, which would be interesting. I think
it's easier to highlight, because I was having a conversation with one of my friends in the car yesterday. You remember the people that miss after being subbed on more than the ones that get subbed on and score. I don't like it personally, but then, like I said, it's because it probably sticks in the mind more than what happens successfully. So, yeah, I'd love to see if there was someone that, studied it, had a look at it and see the stats base for it, because people will be all over this. It's a high pressure environment. It's the Euro 2020, if you're going to say. The England squad, the England staff would have looked at this scenario and said, right, 80% of the time it works. But people that aren't, studying that sort of thing, people that aren't looking at the analytics don't see the 80%. They purely see the 20%. So yeah, it would be interesting to see if that was taken into account, if they had looked at previous players that got subbed on specifically for the reason of needing to score a spot kick.
It's just the mental side of it, isn't it? If you're brought on to, particularly for a penalty, then all the people watching you saying you have to score. You've been brought on for a penalty. I mean, we were saying it when we were watching it, but if you give them a bit more time to sort of bed into the game and relax a little bit and maybe make an impact on the game elsewhere, then they wouldn't be putting as much pressure on themselves coming into the penalty. It's obviously a penalty shootout in the final, there's always going to be pressure. But for those three players that missed, you could tell they were feeling it a little bit more because they were brought on for that reason.
Just a random. You go.
I was going to say, just, when you play football, and even when we're playing for Deportivo on a Sunday, when you come on, you have that initial 10, 20 seconds of burst going, come on then, come on. Adrenaline's absolutely bursting through your body because you want to get on. George probably does his little shuffle in between an imaginary ladder just to get himself pumped up. But the euphoria of coming on, and imagine that on a scale like the European Championships final, and you're thinking that adrenaline's sort of died before they've even stepped up for the penalty, and you can either use the aggression, the adrenaline to score the penalty, or you overthink it. And I think in the end, just the players look nervous as well. I think you could tell. I think everyone, mind you, I say that, but as soon as Jorginho missed, I'm like, yes, this is our moment. No, but yeah, go on.
I have to agree with you there. But when he saved from Jorginho, because when Jorginho stepped up, I thought, we're jumped in my chair, and then suddenly he saved it, and you're like, oh my goodness me! And then 30 seconds later, it was a killer. I think it's worth saying is there as well. You say there, Devon, about the walk and stuff like that. I think Phil Foden did an interview before the Germany game when penalties first came into the equation, and he said they'd been practicing the walk in training, but there's just
can't replicate it.
No, absolutely not.
Get the speakers at the sides of the pitch.
Unless 40 to 60,000 people come down to St George's Park and just surrounded everyone as they were taking that. Because end of the day, players said they block out sometimes the crowd, but in them situations, you tend to. It's like an exam. You're looking sometimes when you're a little bit nervous. You're looking for other things, other factors. If you can't think of an answer, you're looking at a clock, you're looking at other people, you try not cheating wise, but you're like looking just for some inspiration. And I feel like that walk, as soon as you take your eyes up and look at the crowd, the goal shrinks, you tense up. And I think that's what we saw, because the way that Saka and Sancho struck the ball, it wasn't really convincing. And especially with Rashford as well, I think the run-up did him completely. I mean, that was just in them moments because I still don't think that Rashford, even after doing them penalties for Man United and stuff like that, it just takes. There's a time and place, and I don't think that was the time and place for your little fancy stuff, because that was the only penalty I think as well that sent maybe actually the one from Italy, but one of England's penalties that the goalkeeper dove the wrong way as well. Mm-hmm. All he needed to do was get that on target as well. And if he got it on target and keeper saves it, I wouldn't be as mad. But because it just did all that fanning about and hit the post, it just really gets me mad.
Sorry, George, if this is a question that you were going to ask, but it just pops into my head. Do you think it's odds, or what are your thoughts anyway on Southgate individually picking the players to take the penalties? I don't know if you've seen the video of him going up to Sancho, going up to Rashford, going up to Saka. Do you think he should be doing that, or do you think it should be the players' responsibility and how they feel on the day? Because Saka, maybe he could have said no, but he did look extremely nervous, where a player like Grealish, even a player like Pickford would have went, go on, I'll have the responsibility to smash it into the back of the net.
I personally don't mind it, because I think the fact that they will have been practicing penalties for so long, for at least the last month, should suggest that they'll have the best idea of who's capable of taking up. But I also wouldn't completely close off the other argument, because as we said, that taking them in training is completely different to this scenario. However, I do think Saka and Sancho, I don't think Southgate would have had them take one if they weren't comfortable with it. I don't know. That's my feeling on it. Sam, what do you think?
Yeah, it's a difficult one. It's hard to speak for them and how they were feeling in the moment before they took the penalty. And he's obviously going off something. What they've done in training, I don't know. And like you say, they can't. It's impossible to replicate that sort of situation, that atmosphere, that stage for taking a penalty, and just it's hard to say. Like I can't speak for them and how they were feeling. So hindsight's a wonderful thing. And if they'd all gone and bagged their penalties, if you're saying, "Oh, great, well done, Southgate," it's I don't want to waste too much energy on that, to be honest.
I think when you judge it off that, I think it just makes like, I don't know if it just portrays that you're thinking football's robotic. You can do something 10 times out of 10 and score every single penalty, and that's all right. Because on the night, players like Jack Grealish thrive off of that pressure, and especially Pickford. If he'd have made that Jorginho save and then stepped up and took the penalty, man, imagine the confidence like running through his
and he took a great one in that Nations League shootout as well against Switzerland. So you can take penalties.
Yeah, I think like people were going, why is Harry Maguire taking the second penalty? But the thing is, like I think I said in a previous episode, is that was absolutely beautiful penalty. By the way, could not have any qualms about that. But like the thing is like we forward players, when you're taking a penalty shootout, obviously they'll most of the time forward players are running constantly on their feet, running at players, and that's where the lactic acid gets in the legs. Whereas defenders are normally jockeying and not sprinting back as much, especially two centre halves, and that's why defenders are probably take a lot more penalties than attackers do in them situations, especially in them first five. But the problem is just like you're taking away the human element by saying this player's scored more penalties in this one, because at the end of the day, we've all played football, like, and when there's nothing on it in training, people are like still, no matter what situation you try and put them in, everyone's still in a bit of a jokey mood and and plus in training, you're going to try and go for top corners, because if you miss, you're not cost your team a European Championship, have you? It's just something in training that doesn't really take too much into account on that other side. And I think it should be decided on the night, not on. I mean, if a player's come through, say John Stones missed all 10 of his penalties in training, and then comes up and says, "I want to take one," then you're probably going, hold on, let's see if he gets into later ones. But I don't know. He's just taking. I don't know where this is going. Sorry.
That's similar. You mentioned John Stones. That's similar to how I was feeling when Henderson went off in order to bring Rashford on. I was thinking back to that friendly before the tournament, and I was thinking, I don't want Henderson taking another one, because that's just how you feel in the moment, isn't it? I'm sure. Yeah, I'm sure Henderson would have been happy to take one, because he's that kind of guy. He's very confident, isn't he? But that's kind of how I felt.
It is. After even beside everything I just said, it is hard to justify 19-year-old Saka taking the fifth penalty, which is usually a very important one in a shootout. Where I just obviously watching those like behind the scenes videos, Saka comes off as quite confident, quiet, but confident at the same time. But he's just a kid. Like, he's had a great tournament, but 19 years old, the weight of the world on his shoulders for that fifth penalty, I find that hard to justify, besides everything I just said, where hindsight's a great thing and things like that.
Like, maybe obviously Mbappe. Oh, sorry. I was gonna say Mbappe, like players that have played that are young but have played more than like 3 or 4 years, 4 or 5 years of senior football, are already well equipped to them situations, in my opinion. I know Sancho missed, but which completely just blows my argument, so I don't know why I'm continuing.
No, I think it's because Saka, that's his first ever penalty. I don't watch the Bundesliga, so I don't know how many penalties Sancho's taken, for example. But because it's Saka's first ever professional penalty, I think your point stands in the fact that it just seems insane for his first ever penalty to be the most important penalty in England's history, or at least in our personal lifetime.
But the thing is, the flip side of that is, with Maguire, I don't know this for certain, that's probably his first penalty. If he hits that 2 inches higher, it cannons off the bar, and people are going, "Why you got the centre back on the second penalty in the shootout?"
No, but, I mean, the thing is with Maguire is that even though it's just his experience outweighs the rest of them, he knows that he'll be able to compose himself and go, right, forget everything. We've just got to score. And I mean, no one were expecting that. And I mean, he's got a square red, so probably a club foot would have stuck that in top corner anyway. But I think Maguire's composed enough to be able to steady himself just before the penalty, rather than being nervous and because I think if Saka tried that penalty, that'd have gone up straight off at bar. I think there's a line of, it's like golf, because if you get nervous and underhit it or overhit it, it's about being able to stop yourself and just know that you've got a routine in your head. You're like, right, I know the certain amount of power, I know which way I need to go, and it's just it comes with time.
Maybe we should be questioning the order in which they were taken, as well as maybe the takers who stepped up, because I personally was a little bit surprised to see Kane taking the first one. I thought he was a dead cert for number 5, but I suppose he scored it, so it gave us that advantage at the time. So it's hard to analyse these things too much, isn't it? That's why I don't like the fact that a small minority of fans, maybe this hasn't been portrayed so much on Twitter, but certainly we've heard from a few of university mates who are slamming Southgate now when all tournament they've been backing him. I just think that's ludicrous, given what
I think it can go both ways, though. I think people from the Kane situation, from his first 3 games of the tournament, he wasn't great. It doesn't mean that you can't praise him when he does well. You're allowed to critique things when people get them wrong. Don't get me wrong. Southgate's done a lot of 90% of things right. The difference between him and Mancini is that Mancini did 100% of things right. You know, Southgate's done a brilliant tournament up to that point. We got to a final. It's our first since 1966. He's done a brilliant job, but you're allowed to make the small critiques here and there, because that's what everyone does for absolutely everything in life. So I can see it both ways.
You've got to be able to take it on the chin. You can't criticise something, and then when they prove you wrong, just sit back and go, "Oh yeah, I always knew this was going to happen." Yeah. And that's what I think. I can't say. I'm not going to say how I think, but as long a good journalists know when that line is as well. I think we've shown that as well this tournament, because especially when 2 people in this thing said that we were going to go out on the round of 16. We've been shut up well and truly, and we've been able to justify why we sold them the ideas, and then justified why we admire the changes that actually happened.
Yeah, I think it's worth saying as well before we move on from the shootout. There's nothing more that Jordan Pickford could have done. We've already mentioned that Jorginho penalty, but fair play to him. I don't think anyone will be doubting him again from this point onwards. I think
until we'll see in a couple of months he'll end up making one. He should have pushed one wide and end up going through his wrist, and everyone will forget the heroics of the summer, us included, because we did say about Pope coming in. But man, he has given us some absolutely brilliant memories, because you just look at not even forget the final, the saves against Havertz, the couple of saves that he made against even against Ukraine, he made a couple, didn't he? And overall, just the whole tournament has been fantastic. And he stepped up in that final because there were a few from that Chiesa as well. He got down to his left and tipped that. The goal, albeit it went in, but what a tremendous, because he's got to dive behind and sort of flick his wrist. And normal goalkeepers are not in a position that way to be able to react that quickly to try and just, it was just like life or death situation, that. And I think Pickford's just been absolutely brilliant. His best aspect is telling people off for forcing him why he has to be a goalkeeper. Saying, why have I got to save that? Which is true, because defenders should do their job, but he's just absolutely brilliant. I love how angry he is. I just love it.
Yeah. Before we move on to talk briefly on things that we didn't want to be talking about in this episode, I thought it might be worth mentioning when the medals were presented. I think it was noticed by everyone watching how almost all of the England players took their silver medals off immediately after being presented with them. I just thought it'd be interesting to get our views on that. Sam, what do you think? Is that a good thing to see from your view or not?
I don't know how I feel about that, to be honest. I switched it off before that. I was done with it at the moment.
Fair enough.
It's usually I'm all right with it, but in this situation, I feel like it's a bit different, because we're not, as an England team, we've not had this. I think we should be celebrating what we've been able to do. Obviously, the emotions are still raw then for them, so I don't have a huge problem with it. If they felt, still thinking about the game, they're a bit angry, they didn't want to show that they were celebrating coming second in the end. But I think the players should be proud of what they've done and should celebrate this in the end.
That's the thing. They're not getting the second place medal and just fist bumping, going, yes, get in. I think if they want to take their medals, I think if they want to take their medals off, then fair enough, but do it off camera for me. Because for me, it does seem a tad disrespectful to the tournament, but it's their own choice. So
I just think like, when Pep Guardiola kissed his sort of runner-up medal against champions in the Champions League final when they lost to Chelsea, I think people took that out of context massively, and I think it's a momentous occasion. We've got to a final, like in the ground. I know I was slating when people keep saying, "You got to a final, stop being sad," because you're allowed to be mad and sad. But end of day, in context, we've just done fantastically, and these players should take pride from that. It's not just the tournament; it's the other aspects, which we'll probably talk about more when we do as moments of the season and stuff like that. But the outer context of what this England side's done, just not on the pitch, off it. More importantly, they've just got to be proud of what they've done.
Yeah, they certainly deserve all the praise that they've been getting in the last few days, despite the defeat. Moving on then to what I've written down in my notes in the little subheading, I've simply written the stuff we didn't want to be talking about. And we only want to touch on this briefly because, as we said, we want this to be about the football, but it probably needs to be mentioned. First of all, some of the scenes outside Wembley, both before and after the game, which were pretty horrendous to see, to be honest. We know that it was the minority of fans that were doing this, but there was litter everywhere down Wembley Way. I mean, none of us were there, but we've all seen the pictures of it, and then the videos as well of ticketless fans barging through the security guards who were pretty helpless on the turnstiles and outside the ground, to be honest. It did seem like there weren't enough of them there. But sadly, it wasn't really a surprise, Harry, to see this, was it?
It seems that we've seen before, not just in England, but when those minority of England fans go abroad, they absolutely wreck places as well. And we don't see it as much as we used to, but it's a stigma that our fans are wondering why they've got. They wonder why a lot of people don't like English fans or English people. It's because every time we get so close to something and it doesn't quite work out, it seems like we ruin it. If we leave that ground second place and go, do you know what, fair play, we're beaten by the better side, and everyone shakes hands at the end of the day, that's never going to happen because that's not real life. But if it did in the perfect world, then everyone would go, do you know what, fair enough. But sadly, that isn't the case. People smash stuff up. People ruin things. Why would you do that to your own country? Why would you do that anyway? Full stop. Let's get that straight. But especially, why would you do that to your own country, to your own stadium, to your own things? And it just seems absolutely crazy to me. But fair enough to a lot of people that cleaned up the mess. I remember seeing photos the day after, about 6 or 7 or 8 a.m. in the morning, about everything being nice and clean. So it shows the bad people in this country, but it also shows the better side of this country as well. But sadly, a lot of coverage doesn't get shown to the things that get cleaned up. It only gets shown to the things that get smashed up. So I think that's something that does need changing as well in the media.
It would have been worse if we won. That's the thing, I feel like. I think the devastation and the mess would have been worse. And it's just a very unsavoury, embarrassing end, really, for us, and especially for a nation that's vying for the 2030 World Cup. Obviously, this is not going to show us in the best light. And it's just, like you say, Harry, it happens time and time and again with England fans, and I'm a bit sick of it, a bit tired of it, to be honest. We need to start, this team has created a new image for this country, but these fans that are still doing these things are trying to bring it back down, and I'm not here for it, to be honest.
The thing is that it's brought on by success, unfortunately. You get all, like, I know someone that I know apparently switched off the Croatia game when he saw that Calvin Phillips was starting, and yet they were at the final giving it the big one. And you're thinking, like, these people, especially the people outside, would have been the people that were that have just only just come because England are doing well. You get these people all the time. Like, I know you guys at club football, you'll see people that come when your team's doing well, but when Norwich go up, the attendances obviously will increase slightly, but you'll get them people that come here fair weather, and then when they go back down, they just disappear for a year before coming back out. And I think every single moment of that, but there's no excuse for just acting like, I don't want to swear on podcasts, idiots. There's just no, because it's not just that. It's like Harry said, it's the people cleaning up. These should be the images. These should be people that should be hailed as heroes alongside this England squad. The people that put the heartwarming messages on the Marcus Rashford mural should be the people that get this attention, not the yobs that have decided that they're going to take matters into their own hand because England are doing well. There's no excuse for it. Stop being idiots.
There we go.
Yeah, I think it's also pretty horrible, as big football fans like we are, that those people in this country who maybe aren't so keen on the sport but get caught along with the ride through this tournament, they then see the tournament end and they're left with that lasting image of this is what the football fans are like. And that just isn't what it's like. Not what they're all like. Like it's such a small number of people, but sadly that is the case. And I suppose the same applies for what has happened on social media as well. The racist trolls. I mean, this again is something we have seen before and something which just gets all the more horrible to read about as you see it happen more often, Harry. It's just disgusting, isn't it? What can we say on this?
Well, it's quite a clear thing to say. If a player does something bad and the first thing you think of is the colour of the skin, then you're an absolute disgrace of a human. And that's all I can really say on it, to be honest, because people, I think it was Simon Jordan that was talking in TalkSport, and I don't normally agree with a lot of the things that he says, but this is spot on. When you try and think about why they've done it, you're already too far gone, because you can't think like they do. It's just completely wrong. Your brain doesn't operate in trying to reason why they do it, because they're not one of it's wrong. It's just completely and utterly wrong.
Gary Neville was spot on once again. Comes from the top, and that's all I really want to say. We've got these government officials who are condemning the England team taking a knee at the start of the tournament, and they become, they get on their horse, they become the white knight and try to pretend that they're on the side of this team, on the side of the players that are getting abused when they were.
Priti Patel.
They were inciting this. They were inciting this behaviour in the first place, to be honest, saying those things. So. Just embarrassing, a cowardly act from these people online, and more action needs to be taken.
Yeah, I think it's fair to say the racist trolls will probably never be completely removed, but I think it's long overdue that something is put in place to try and reduce the damage that is done through that.
The thing is, now we've got an England side that takes responsibilities, takes these issues on board, and actually is inspiring a next generation that the generation under us needs to be the one that's it's going to get targeted. Generation change anyway. Like, you think back to some of the things that your granddads and grandmas probably grew up with, and the sort of choice of language that are still here today in the streets of Worksop, which is not what you want to hear. It's not right. And it's about influencing that, like we've done it with a PR campaign about the Northern Ireland women, about you've got to take that next generation and educate them, and it's going to be a long process. But I just don't get why people think in their thick skulls that this is okay. This is your instant reaction. It shouldn't be. It should be like every normal fan would have either took pride in what had happened or had a little cry, but then took pride in. And it's like, we just think about how many of them people were criticising Hungary for their homophobic stuff, and how, like, in Bulgaria when they were being racist on that. Imagine all the steps forward that people are trying to do, and then they just, I don't understand. How can your reaction be that?
Yeah, it's difficult to understand, as Harry was saying, as we've all said. But as you said, Devon, we've got a team to be proud of now, and hopefully they continue that in only 16 months at the next tournament. But we won't get into that now. We're going to come on shortly to quickly go through a few tournament awards and suggest a few contenders for that. Before we do that, the Euro Fantasy League that we set up, of course, that's all over now. We had 18 entrants into our league for the tournament. In third place was a team called The Beast. They got 329 points. Second place was Leave My Barcelona. They finished with 348 points. And then the top of the league, I managed to top the league with 300.
I just managed it.
I should say my team was called Couldn't Care Less. That couldn't really have been further from the truth, to be honest. But there we go. At least this means
this is coming from someone that beforehand said, "Oh, I'm not bothered about fantasy football anymore."
At
least Toby wasn't in our formation league, so he'd beat you. Yeah, yeah.
Oh, he might have been. He might have just going by a ghost name. Thankfully, this does mean we don't have to fork out for a prize unless you guys want to give me something for it. I mean,
no.
Nah, you're all right.
But
would you like this hay fever release?
I think I'll pass. You're very kind. Moving on then to the tournament awards. We'll start with a bit of a generic one. The player of the tournament. The official UEFA award for this went to Gianluigi Donnarumma, who was our nemesis, of course, in that shootout. Before we come on to give our own suggestions for this one, do you think that was a good decision to give it to him, or did it surprise you a little bit? Devon, what's your take?
I mean, he has been absolutely fantastic, especially when it's come to trumps and they've needed him. But for the group games, he was pretty much a bystander for most of that. I think Italy were too dominant in them moments. But like we said, especially in the key moments against Austria, against Spain, he really came out on top and showed why he's probably one of the best goalkeepers in the world currently.
Yeah, I suppose the fact that he got through 2 shootouts with them and saved penalties in both says a lot, doesn't it?
I do think there's better players though that have made more of an impact than him.
Go on, I'll open the floor there. Who are you putting forward?
Well, even in this Italian side, I think Spinazzola has been more effective compared not necessarily the best player, but the engine and the key to how they. As soon as they lost him, they lost the way forward in terms of how dominant they were. I think Nico Baera has been very good. But I think one person, and it's definitely not England bias, but I think Luke Shaw has been absolutely integral to everything England has done. He's got 1 goal, 3 assists over the tournament. He's just been, when you think about England's transitional play, he's just the player there, that focal point, not focal point, one of the players that just doesn't, it's kind of underappreciated in the system, but, he drives forward. Defensively, he's absolutely brilliant. And I think Luke Shaw out of everybody, I know Sterling's been fantastic, Pickford, Calvin Phillips, but I think Luke Shaw's would be my pick just because I'm biased, because I'm English.
It's interesting you say Shaw, because they just released the UEFA team of the tournament this morning, and he wasn't even in that, which was maybe a surprise, but I suppose there were so many good left backs. Harry, you nodded your head when Devon said Shaw. Is he in your thoughts as well?
I mean, yeah, he was certainly in my thoughts because he was an integral part of the England team. And Chilwell got called up, didn't play a single minute of football. So that sort of showed his domineering left-hand side. Other players, I think, an underrated, I don't know if this is, I can't remember if this is a category, but I think if Switzerland won their penalty shootout against Spain, I think Jan Sommer could certainly be chucked in there. I think he was a massive part in why Switzerland were so successful and why they beat France. So for me, just a bit of a different shout, because the 2 top goal scorers in Patrick Schick and Ronaldo got knocked out quite early. So both of them are completely off the list. So if we're going a bit left field, I'd say Jan Sommer is certainly up there.
I think even Steven Zuber from Switzerland, 4 assists overall. He's been absolutely fantastic for him.
Yeah, Sam, who are you thinking for this?
Yeah, it's only natural for me to go with someone from the Italy side, I think, with them being the winners, and I went with Bonucci in the end. I think he's been And we have a present 2 match-winning performances in the semi-final and final. I think he only missed the second half against Wales. Apart from that, he's played the whole time. Not been dribbled past once by a single opponent alongside Chiellini, 34 years old. What a player. He's still going.
Yeah, I like that decision from Sam, just because I think in the overall team, I think players like Chiesa, especially in the last couple of games, have stood out. I think Locatelli started absolutely like a house on fire. He was absolutely brilliant. But in terms of consistency, that one player that's been overall there, I think Sam's probably correct in saying Bonucci.
Yeah, and I think that there's maybe an argument for Bonucci and Chiellini to share this one, given their clear bond. I have to say, I quite like the idea of this going to Sterling. I just think the fact he was such a scapegoat at the start of the tournament, and he proved so many people wrong, and he ultimately dragged England through that group stage. I know that someone might have come up with the goals anyway, but it was him who did it, and he was very good in those knockout games too, even when he didn't score. So I think hell of a tournament for him, and I think Pep Guardiola will maybe be reconsidering getting rid of him this summer, because I know there were reports that he could be on his way out. Maybe he won't now, but we shall see.
Absolutely. Big respect to him.
Moving on then to discuss our young player of the tournament. This is another one that UEFA have already handed out officially, their own award. That went to Spain midfielder Pedri. If any of you have Pedri as your choice, then please feel free to speak now and explain why. I think it might be a few of you, though. Who wants to go first? Sam.
Yeah, I mean, just brilliant. Spain have the next Iniesta, and that's not a wild statement, because Luis Enrique, the manager, said it himself. Even Iniesta, at 18 years old, wasn't doing what Pedri's doing for Spain. Had just 4 caps for them before the start of the tournament, but he missed 1 minute of their entire Euros campaign. Completed 429 of his 465 passes, so 92% success rate. For the style of play that Spain have, they retain the ball so much. He was key to that, and key to their success really is one of the surprise teams of the tournament, I think.
Yeah,
Anything to add? Go on.
Yeah, I think just obviously 18 years old. Some stats that have come out after the tournament: most accurate through balls with 4, 27 shot creating actions, and 5 goal creating actions, which are all the most. And he's topping. Imagine just at 18 topping the charts, and it's as Sam said, he's maintained 92% pass accuracy, and it's not just the passes like you associate with Spain that are like he's just passing the ball straight to the centre half and then getting it back and passing it to the other centre half. He actually spins and fires it into the forward line for Spain to attack. He really hits it with some intensity, and I think he's got probably one of the assists of the tournament for when he scored that own goal against Croatia, which was like great. But it just shows. Yeah, I just think, but it just shows how good he is and how intense he can pick out a pass that leads to another goal. And yeah, I just want to make that joke.
Didn't it go down as an OG? That
it did for Pedri. Yeah. Yeah, I lobbed my 5 guys burgers and fries pen when Devon read out those stats, because they were delivered on my page. But I think he's got 73 league appearances at the age of 18. So it shows you that he's got experience at the senior level, and like you guys have already covered, he showed it already, and he's going to be the future of that Spain midfield. Look, if he doesn't have to move, he can play till he's about 38. So that's another 10 international tournaments that he's got, and I'm sure he's going to get plenty of silverware, both club and country, along the way, as long as Spain find a striker that can actually score.
The thing is, now Barcelona will
sort their finances out.
Yeah, he could be the next person to take that Barcelona mantle just because of who they're going to have left.
Yeah, let's get rid of all their players.
I'm looking forward to the guy that prints the shirts, that does the shirt printing and names and number on the back, starting up front next to next to the dinner lady.
Well, a player who has been linked with Barcelona, as well as a couple of other clubs, who also probably deserves a mention when we're discussing this award, is Mikhail Damsgaard, who also made it to the semi-finals. He's a player, I have to say, I hadn't heard of him before the tournament, but he's made a hell of an impression. because I think after the Christian Eriksen incident, I think a few people feared where Denmark's creativity was going to come from, and I think he was key to their resurgence through the rest of the tournament. That free kick goal against England was quite something. Whether he goes to Barcelona or not is a different thing, isn't it? But he's certainly boosted his acclaim in this tournament.
Stories, him and Sterling, I think, stories of the tournament, really. Him carrying the torch for Eriksen and Sterling silencing all the critics, I think.
Yeah, it brings on another good point that I wanted to make that I forgot to write down. But I think Højbjerg as well could have been a shout for a player of the tournament, because I think Damsgaard brought the attacking sense, but I think Højbjerg was the real pin of that team to actually get them back on side and cashier as well. I think it took a lot of belief and to turn around what happened.
Let's not forget what Saka did before the penalty miss as well. That's gonna get pushed to the side because of what happened, but he's been brilliant. He wasn't even in most of our squads to start the tournament, and he's been one of our best players. So.
Certainly,
I think Freddie Woodman's up there as well for his impact, not in the tournament.
You won't get over Freddie Woodman, will you?
I tell you what, when he's lifting the World Cup in 18 months' time, whatever it is.
What, having sat on the bench for Pickford all tournament?
Yeah, I mean, at Ramsdale, we're going to do it. So.
Fair point. Moving on then, I think we're pretty happy with Pedri in that award. The goal of the tournament, and there are quite a few good candidates for this one. Have we all got a favourite? It might be difficult to find a winner, but what's your favourite, Devon?
I just think because it's against Scotland and how much they're celebrating currently, I'm going to go for Patrick Schick's effort. Just because there's the technique that he had on it to get it over Marshall, the movement of the ball, and also it's not a ball that's rolling to him so he can get enough trajectory on it. It's rolling away from him, and I just think to try that as well in a game where the Czechs weren't really dominating yet. I think Scotland still had a foothold, and it just completely silenced them. And lovely, it made them forget everything. Yeah,
I have to say, I don't think any of the goals top Schick's. I think it was a phenomenal hit. Other suggestions though, as maybe places on the podium.
Pogba versus Switzerland was one of those that made me go, ooh, lovely. And the typical Pogba goal as well. I think he scored one of those in the Premier League. I think it was against West Ham. That beautiful swerve he gets on the ball.
One of my favourites were Benzema's second against Switzerland as well, where he had to drag the ball from behind
whether he meant it or not, but I wouldn't.
I mean, football's about luck sometimes, and he pulled that off because it wasn't just the pull back from that; it was also the chip as well over Sommer. It was just a beautiful goal and something that in a game where probably one of the games of the tournament as well, probably two contenders for that as well.
Yeah, for me, my second place to Patrick Schick. You see Benzema score every week. Pogba tries that shot 3 times a game and it goes in sometimes. But for me, Anders Christensen, I was about to say against Denmark, against Russia, the ball was just bobbling. I can't really remember the build-up too much, but I remember the ball just wasn't going in the net for that specific occasion. So he just goes, I'll have some of this. Whack. Right into the back of the net. And it was in probably Denmark's biggest game of the tournament because they needed to win by 3 goals. And that was, I believe, their third of 4 that they needed because obviously Russia scored. And what a moment around that was. I know the moment doesn't really make the goal of the season because the goal is the specific goal that it is, but it just all helps in the massive sort of what's a goal? Just what's a goal?
Most satisfying goal, I think that one.
Yeah.
The connection.
I think most people are forgetting the impact of obviously nowadays we've got trialists A and B, and I think Own Goals had a fantastic tournament. He's been very prolific and he's got some fantastic efforts in there.
I think they were top scorer, weren't they? Own Goals.
It's got like
got given to Ronaldo on the.
I think it's more on goals in this tournament than the others combined. I think.
Which one was your favourite own goal though? Was it Dubravka or was it Rodri's?
The Kier one at Wembley. Is it Kier? I don't know.
It's the one I celebrated the most anyway.
Oh yeah.
I don't know. I think Mats Hummels' effort against France was phenomenal.
Good finish, wasn't it? As well, there were some good goals scored in Copenhagen. Another one I've got written down is the Kevin De Bruyne one when Belgium went on the counter and then it was moved across to De Bruyne and he powered it in with his left foot. That was another satisfying one to watch.
I don't know why it sticks in my head, but I think your Amshuks against North Macedonia as well. It were only a simple ball through, and then his finish with a kind of stroke around the goalkeeper. But I just think it's just a nice goal to watch. I don't know why. It's not the best, but I just wanted to bring it up.
A random one.
Yeah, your Amshuk is another name that people will take out this tournament, having maybe not known it beforehand. But I think in terms of the goal, I think we do still think it's going to be Patrick Schick because some moment that was. But we do want to talk about the moments of the tournament now. And Harry, you mentioned Christensen and that night for Denmark. Before you suggest your ideas, I want to put this forward. I think that night when Denmark beat Russia was such a special evening. And I think it was what the Danish fans and players deserved after what they'd been through before. It seemed like every goal was celebrated in some style. The Christensen goal in particular, and then those scenes at the full-time whistle, I just think that was difficult to top, personally.
Scenes we've missed, really, having no fans in stadiums, and a lot of the time you can't capture the atmosphere through a television screen, but with that one, I definitely could. You could hear it from here almost.
What are our other suggestions on this one? Any surrounding England? Maybe the Germany.
I've got one. I think the pictures of actual Christian Eriksen getting taken off the pitch and awake, and then the pictures after it with a selfie and stuff like that, just making sure that you were okay were actually touching moments as well after the panic. And I think we've already touched on that. But I don't know if this is going to count or not, but I think the England squad after that semi-final as well, I just think they broke barriers, morals. I just hope they don't get lost through these racists and mobs, because that's what they are. But, the actual taking the knee, different cultures feeling inclusive, people united, just England, the England squad giving belief back into that. And that, I don't know if this is just a cheat to say that we're proud of this England squad, but they have just delivered this package of something different, and people are actually resonating with this England squad that take responsibility and just want to drive a different message and shut politicians up like Tyrone Mings did last night.
Yeah. Harry, do you think that any doubts before the tournament about Wembley's atmosphere have now been taken away? Because we've seen so many special England games, haven't we?
I think people just now love the fact that they're back in the stadium. I think before we took it for granted, it was just like, a 90,000 capacity stadium there, we'll just walk in, you can get a ticket anywhere. Whereas now these things are like gold dust to get in these stadiums. Like I felt it when I was at my personal club, Southampton's game, that every Saints fan wants to be there. It just felt brilliant just to be sat back in the stadium. But not just that, sat with people that are exactly like you. They're supporting the same team that you are, rather than sat at home watching the game. As much as I did love the Gow Street environment watching the football, being able to celebrate with people, because I remember that Luke Shaw goal, and it's not the moment of the tournament, but it's my moment of the tournament, because that's the most I've ever celebrated an England goal, because that's when we thought the dream's on. It's just going to be another absolutely brilliant moment. I remember I say remember as if it was ages ago, it was less than 48 hours ago. There was 12 or 13 of us, and it was just this absolutely collective hug, just mind blown. It was just crazy. But the non-England moment for me was Jan Sommer's save against Mbappe in the penalty shootout, because you toppled the giants, you toppled everyone before the game thinks you're going to lose. Everyone thought you're going to lose when you're 3-1 down. You've A, scored 3 goals against France in normal time, but B, then to beat them on penalties, it was absolutely crazy. Absolutely crazy.
I think you could even put Mario Gravanovich's header, I can't remember what it were now, but just that goal to make it 3-all, just absolutely euphoria after that.
Devon, I thought you'd want to mention Goran Pandev's goal in this little section. I know how much you're a fan.
No, because I don't know. It was good. It was a great moment as well to see him. It become North Macedonia's youngest ever goal scorer at first, but actually bow out an international career that for a nation that doesn't get much success at all. And I think it just to go out on that and say, just inspire another generation were fantastic. I don't know. I can't think of any other. What about Scotland's biggest win of their history against England? Does anyone remember that?
No, I think we'd rather not. All I remember is
Big 0-0 win.
Grant Hanley performance, absolutely world class, one absolute rock.
And now he's got to go back to an underachieving side again.
Oh, come on, we're staying up this year. I say that every year. Moving on then.
Hang on. We're just skipping over me, are we?
Sorry.
What you having for dinner then?
I had the France and Switzerland game as a whole, and also in brackets that Switzerland fan, because we can all resonate. We can all resonate with him. The head in your hands to top off, fist bumps everywhere, and that game just had everything. Biggest shock of the tournament, all the goals, penalties, everything. So that was just brilliant.
I also think another good moment was when we saw Gareth Southgate actual emotions top Southgate in the semi-finals. I think even at that point I said, like against Croatia when we beat Colombia on penalties, he seemed to go a little bit downhill from when he actually showed some emotion, and we lost the final obviously after showing some emotion. But you just got to give it to him, haven't you? After it's like a redemption story, and
it's a redemption story to all the people who doubted him, but to all the people who backed him.
You're all over him now, Devon. Should we?
No, I know.
The tournament.
Some of us have seen some very bad stuff when supporting works up on Wednesday. It's hard not to be pessimistic about everything and not an happy clapper when you get promoted every 2 seasons, George.
Not anymore, because we're not going down anymore.
When you go back down, you'll have another couple of years of transition.
We shall move on to the surprise package of the tournament, and we're talking mainly about a team for this one. I think Denmark probably the obvious choice for this one, right, Harry?
Yeah, I think Denmark certainly, especially because of the horrendous incident that happened in the first game, losing to Finland, then losing to Belgium, and then they had to have that momentum. They had to win by quite a big goal margin, and they did exactly that. So getting that far was very impressive. They got so close. If there was anyone that I wanted to win the Euros bar England, it would have been Denmark. So I think I speak for many people in the fact that if they did beat us, I'd have been very annoyed, but I would have been cheering them in the final as well. I also think Switzerland, I think it's the first time that they won a game in the knockout stages, and it was against France, which is huge. And then they got so close yet so far against Spain. Just penalties once again being an absolute pain for people. So if they got through that, you could certainly say then, but yes, it should be Denmark for a multitude of different reasons.
Surely you could make an argument for Italy here as well, Sam. I know you said they could win the tournament, but you were also almost saying it as they probably won't, but maybe they could, yeah?
Because they went 100% in the qualifying campaign, but it was against teams that you'd say that, they should beat them, and that they've proved it on the big stage now, and they're a team to be feared under Mancini. He's just done an absolutely brilliant job, but we've lauded them for long enough. I think my surprise was for the wrong reasons. In the end, it was Turkey, as they were backed by many, including yours truly, to be a dark horse in the tournament, and they ended up losing all 3 group games with a -7 goal difference, with their only goal of consolation in the final game. So there was me shut up, backing them to do big things in this tournament, and they did the exact opposite in the end.
Any other suggestions, Devon?
I'm a bit annoyed that you're not even mentioned that I said about Italy as well. But no, I've got four things written down here for my surprise package. I've got Denmark. Harry's already said that. I've got Switzerland. Harry said that again. I've got Turkey. Sam said that. So I'm going to go with my fourth one, which is not even a team. It's Jordan Pickford. I think just completely shut everyone up, being absolutely fantastic. Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's certainly fair enough. We were all calling for Pope 3-4 months ago, weren't we? We all said, let's have Pope in goal. Pope couldn't be there. So I suppose we'll never know what Southgate's choice would have been if Pope had been fit. But I think it probably would have been Pickford. I think.
Just think if we'd have won that penalty shootout, then Pickford would have seen off 2 Popes.
Oh dear.
That's the end
he's
of the
happy with that
formation.
one. And I think
that
Welcome to the end of the Fourmation Podcast.
that is a good way to tie this week up, I would say. Unless we've got anything else to add.
Yeah, we had 7 other categories, but we have to enter here after that moment. So
I think it's been a phenomenal tournament. I think if we can just say it's the perfect reply from an absolutely diabolical 18 months in the world. I think it's brought everyone together, especially in England, and I'm sure the same scenes will be in Italy as well. They've had a very tough year, especially when they're one of the first countries to really get COVID-19 really bad, and I think we were the same. It sort of it's brought everyone together. It's made people see the light in a very depressive moment.
Yeah, absolutely right. And I think hopefully now we are on the other side of it. And the best part about a major tournament summer is that the league season now isn't very far away at all. And fingers crossed, when it does begin in 3 or 4 weeks' time, there are fans back in every single stadium, because as we've said so many times before, we are done with behind closed doors football. But the Euros are over. We hope you've enjoyed kind of what we've done over the last few weeks. And thank you very much for watching. We will see you next time.